G'day ladies and gents, 2021 has kicked off with a trend. I don't normally jump on board with trends, but the year has started with workshop tours, and I haven't done one of those for you guys before. Or for me. See, workshop tours are a great way to keep track of how your workshop develops and changes over the years of YouTube, which I've missed some pretty significant upgrades. If you were around for my very first video I put out over 2 years ago, that was my workshop setup video. The workshop that I operate in today is vastly different from what that setup was. So I figured I'd take the time today to give you a walk around my workshop, show you what's here and the space that I operate in. Of course, if you've got any questions or you want any reviews on the specific tools that I've got, just leave me a comment down below and I will get to that. But I will try and answer as much as I can in this video. So there's going to be a lot of me talking in this video. So let's crack into it. I'm based in Perth in Western Australia and I'm working out of a 2-car garage on a fairly new estate. I say it's a new estate because in Australia it seems the newer the houses get, the smaller the room gets and the smaller the blocks get. So my space here is 5.8 meters across by 5.6 meters deep and I've only got like 30 centimeters above my head. That's probably the worst part, is the roof is just there. This place felt absolutely massive when I first set this workshop up, but over the years I've purchased larger machines to get more quality work done and the space fills up quickly. So I'm gonna start this tour on this side of my workshop. We're gonna work our way all the way around until we get back to the starting point. It is worth noting that I spent some time yesterday cleaning up my shop, and I got halfway through that and I thought, why am I cleaning up my shop for a workshop tour? None of us work in a clean shop, unless you're Brad Rodriguez. I don't think I've ever seen dust in that dude's workshop. So I gave it a bit of a tidy up, but I didn't go nuts because this is an operational workshop after all. So I've got some wood storage piles that are a bit messy and there's some dust on some surfaces, but this is what I work in. So keep your little judgmenty comments of how dusty the place is to yourself. All right, so to kick off, right in the corner here, I've got this cast iron top router table. This is an old machine by Jet, and this was given to me by Gary over at Gibshaw Craft. It's essentially a baby spindle molder. I haven't played around with this machine much. It does come in handy here and there, and in the future, if I do get a bigger workshop, I will be looking to upgrade this router table. But for the time being, it works beautifully. Moving on from the router table, we've got my reclaimed wood miter station that I built a little while ago. You can check that out up here. This thing allowed me to completely alter the way my workshop was set up, provides great dust collection for the miter saw, and a few little storage compartments for different bits and pieces. This was a fun build, however I did build it extremely quickly and cheaply. It's not 100% accurate, and once again it will be something that I look to upgrade in the future. But for the time being, it's ace. Now this particular storage compartment I built specifically to hold my thicknesser. However, I've just upgraded my thicknesser and the new one does not fit in this compartment. So that's something I've got to work on. As you can see, she's a little bit bigger. Behind my miter station is where I store majority of my slabs. It's quite messy back there. As you can see, we've got a ton of slabs there. So just to the left of my miter stand, I've developed this offcut pile because every good woodworker never throws away any piece of wood. This thing is getting a bit out of control now and I do need to look at reorganizing this system. The last thing along this wall is now my resin cabinet. I picked up this cabinet for 20 bucks off Buy Swap Sell, and this is where I house all of my resin, my pigments, and all the supplies that I need to do resin work. I also mounted this little holder for my Cat's Moses apron so that it's easily accessible. And to end this wall off, we've got the entryway door into the house, along with the J&D banner that's been in this workshop since the first video. Now, along the back wall of my workshop is the most common backdrop I use in most of my talking scenes in my videos. It's my 3-meter workbench that again has been here since the start and is probably one of the only things that is still in its original position. I built a bit of a makeshift tool wall when I first set up this workshop, and that has just continued to expand to the point that it's at now. Surprisingly, I don't actually tend to use this workbench too much for putting pieces together anymore. It's become more of a place to store stuff. As you can see there, I use the bottom shelf of the workbench as a wood storage area for my Jarrah burl, pallet wood, plywood, and some other offcuts. I've also got a sticker collection there. Now the back corner of my workshop here is where I've built a very dodgy clamp station that I store all of my woodworking clamps on. The storage shelf behind me is another thing I knocked up for under $5, and if you want to check that out, I'll have a link up here for this build. Again, a very cheap and nasty way to store stuff, and it has worked absolutely beautifully for me. I've got a heap of turning blanks stored here, another offcut storage pile, some small chunks of wood here that I can either slab up or turn on the lathe, and then some longer lengths of pallet wood and some other stumps up the top there. I built this storage thing specifically to fit my toolboxes in, and I've got a collection of router bits and other bits and pieces all in this area here. For under $5, that thing works beautifully. It doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't need to. Just next to that very, very cheap shelving setup, I've got this not so cheap lathe. Bringing this into my workshop was a massive deal for J&D Creations. For those guys who have watched my channel from the start, you may remember that I kicked this channel off with an MC 1018 lathe from Carbatec. It was about this big. This upgrade was absolutely phenomenal for my shop. This is the WLV 1100C, and it's the biggest lathe in the Carbatec range. Complete electronic variable speed, articulating head, outboard turning capabilities, 1.1 meter bed length. It's a sturdy machine, and I really have loved using this. If you want to check out when I got this, I'll link the very first video up the top here. Now, unfortunately, it appears that this lathe has been taken off the Carbatec website, so I can't leave you guys a link down below. I'm not sure whether it's been taken out of their lineup or whether they'll be bringing out a new version soon, but this thing is a beast. Now, tucked away under my lathe is where I store my jointer, almost as if it was perfectly designed to fit there. This jointer has an 8-inch bed, it's a benchtop version, and it is absolutely awesome for my needs. Absolute top machine. Now, if we continue on down from my lathe, I've got another workbench I've set up here that is very much orientated towards the lathe. I've got my Robert Sorby Pro Edge right next to my lathe so that sharpening and jumping between the two machines is very simple. This, by the way, is a phenomenal sharpening system. I would highly recommend this to anybody, not just turners. This thing is awesome. Another bit of a tool wall at the back that has all of my chucks and different jaws and accessories for my lathe. I've got a cheap Work Zone belt and disc sander from Aldi, which has actually been amazing. I got this thing before I got 90% of the gear in this shop, and it still runs perfectly. Then underneath the bench is where I store all of my lathe chisels. This was another very quick and cheap build. It allows easy access when I'm turning to just come and grab whatever tool I need. Now, tucked away right in the back of my shop is my 2 horsepower dust collector from Carbatec, the DC 1200P. I'll have a link for this down below, but this is more than capable of providing dust collection for all my machinery, my table saw, my bandsaw, my miter saw, my lathe. It is a really, really capable machine, and it's at a great price point as well. Moving on from the dust collection, I've got some storage boxes there that contain some mineral oil for dunking boards and just a bit of other crap that doesn't fit anywhere. And then we land at the second significant investment for the J&D workshop, my bandsaw. Now, I absolutely love this bandsaw. It's a 14-inch high-capacity bandsaw, and the reason I went with this one is because it had the largest resaw capacity of the entire Carbatec range, even though it doesn't have the biggest throat. The model I've got here, I know for certain that Carbatec no longer sell anymore. This is the 10-amp 2 horsepower version, but they do still sell the 15-amp 3 horsepower version, so if you're interested in that, I will leave a link down below for you. This has got a 360mm resaw capacity, which is insane for a bandsaw of this size. I've never had any issues with the 2 horsepower. It's more than adequate for the type of work that I do, and having this machine has just been an absolute godsend. It has saved me from having to outsource simple jobs that I'm more than capable of doing but wasn't able to do before I got this. Absolutely love it. Now, I've got this bandsaw on a Bora mobile base so that it is completely portable. The Bora PM 2500, and I'll have a link for that down in the description below. That mobile base is more than capable of handling the weight of this machine, and I actually have the exact same base under my table saw without an issue. Having big machines like this mobile in a workshop like mine is absolutely essential. When I first got this machine, due to the layout of my workshop, it was actually positioned over where my dust collector now is, and I had to use that mobile base to drag it out every time I wanted to use it. When you're working in a small workshop, having the ability to move big machines like this around by yourself, store them in weird and wonderful positions, is really essential for workflow. A little while back though, I redesigned my whole workshop so that I could leave this in a position that would allow me good in-feed and out-feed room so that I didn't have to move it as often. So that's the full loop around the outside of my workshop. Let me show you what sits in the middle. You guys have seen me do the setup video on this table saw, you've seen the review on this table saw, and you've seen me use it a multitude of times. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. I love this machine. You'll know that if you've seen my review. If you haven't, check it out. This was my third significant investment in my workshop, and it has been a complete game changer. I will have a link for this in the description below. If you're in the market for a table saw, I could not recommend this one enough. Once I bought my table saw, I needed to build an outfeed table for it, and that's where this beauty came into play. I can only add 5 cards into this video, so if I've got any left, I will add a link up here for this outfeed table. I built this over a 2-part video series, Australian hardwood outfeed table with resin river draw fronts. It doesn't even look like it should be in a workshop. This outfeed table was a huge game changer for me as well. It gave me a heap of storage with 8 drawers on this side and storage for all of my power tools on the other side. I finally had a bench that I could mount a woodworking vise onto, and I installed some T-track in the top to allow me to clamp pieces in place when I'm sanding them and working on them. It has been an absolute workhorse for me since I built it. So guys, that's an in-depth look at the J&D workshop. We've got 5.6 meters by 5.8 meters. Got a ton of tools in this space, and I think I'm at a point now where I've developed a very efficient layout of this shop to allow me to use all of these tools in the best way possible. Of course though, while you've been walking around with me, if you've seen anything that you think I could alter or change that would improve my workflow, please leave me a comment down below. There are still a number of tools that I want to add into the J&D workshop, but I'm just about at capacity in this shop. But hopefully, eventually, I can move into something bigger and continue to grow. I hope this has given you guys a good insight into what I work with, and if you want a serious laugh, I suggest going back to my first ever video. Firstly, seeing how bad I was at talking to a camera, but see what I actually started this workshop with, because I didn't start with the big tools. I didn't start with the fancy lathe or the multiple workbenches. I started with a lot of secondhand stuff, like secondhand dining tables that I would use as workbenches and other bits and pieces that I just made work for as cheap as I could. When I kicked off J&D Creations, we had no money. At that point, my son had been in hospital for about 2 years. We're not from Perth, so we were living in a foreign state, out of work, because we had to be with our son at the hospital every day, and we just completely had to start from scratch again. Now, if you'd like me to go more into that story about how and why J&D Creations come about, then just leave me a comment down below. If there's enough interest in it, I will definitely do a video for you guys to explain to you how and why I started this venture in the first place and how it's really changed my life. If I didn't cover anything about the tools I've got or the layout I've got, guys, just leave me a comment down below. I'll be sure to answer. I can also do full reviews on any of the stuff in here that you like. You've just got to ask. If you're not subscribed yet, please click that button and ring that notification bell. I'm putting out content all the time, different projects, different reviews. It's worth being part of the family here. If you enjoyed this video, then I think you'll probably like my review playlist, which I'll leave queued up for you here. And down the bottom here is something YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Until next time, guys, stay safe, look after yourself, and I will see you soon.